There's a truth you carry, wild, raw, unpolished, that has lived inside you since the very beginning, but you were taught to hide it, to polish your pain into politeness, to shrink your grief into silence, to paint over your fear with a smile, because the world loves the mask more than the face. It celebrates the illusion of strength more than the reality of vulnerability. And so, you learned. Feeling is dangerous. Honesty is weakness. Emotional truth must be hidden at all costs. Before we dive deeper into the hidden power of what you've been taught to fear, stay with me until the end. Because sometimes the most important truths aren't found in the polished surface, but in the cracks we were told to hide. Think about it. How often do you answer, "I'm fine," when your soul is breaking inside? How many times have you laughed when you wanted to cry? Because you knew the real answer would make others uncomfortable. How often have you swallowed your needs, your grief, your rage, not because you didn't feel them, but because you were afraid of what would happen if you dared to show them? Most notice honesty doesn't always come from malice. Most of the time it's born from fear. Fear of being rejected, fear being judged, fear being seen and not being loved. But what if everything you've been taught about emotional honesty is wrong? What if emotional honesty isn't weakness, but power? What if the very thing you fear will destroy you is actually the bridge back to your wholeness, your freedom, your true strength? There's a hidden force inside of you, not the polished, curated self you learned to display, but the raw, breathing, feeling truth of who you really are. And the world doesn't need more perfect masks. It needs more real faces. If you feel something stirring inside you already, if you sense that maybe, just maybe, your emotions aren't your enemies, consider subscribing here. We explore the spaces most people are afraid to enter. Here, your realness is not a problem. It's your greatest power. The question isn't, how do I become stronger by hiding my emotions better? The real question is, what would my life become if I stopped apologizing for feeling? What would I discover about myself if I told the truth, even when it scares me? There is a strength that doesn't come from perfection, a strength that rises from the rubble of broken expectations, a strength that says, "This is who I am, in my fear, in my rage, in my longing, and I refuse to hide it anymore." Are you ready to discover the power you've been taught to fear? Are you ready to meet the parts of yourself you were told were too much? Are you ready to see that emotional honesty isn't the problem, it's the path? Emotions were never the enemy, but somewhere along the way, you were taught to believe they were. You were taught that anger is dangerous, that sadness is weakness, that fear must be hidden, that even joy, if it grows too wild, must be tamed into acceptable enthusiasm. The world didn't ask you to feel. It asked you to perform. Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And nowhere is this more true than in the realm of emotions. Because to feel honestly is to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable in a world that worships control is to be seen as foolish, unstable, even dangerous. Thus, from an early age, many of us learned a brutal but unspoken rule: adapt or be abandoned, suppress or be shamed, hide or be hurt. In psychological terms, this is known as emotional suppression, the learned habit of minimizing, ignoring, or rejecting authentic emotional experiences. According to emotional regulation research, chronic suppression doesn't eliminate emotions, it buries them, locking them deep within the body and mind, where they fester, distort, and quietly shape behavior in destructive ways. When you suppress sadness, it doesn't disappear. It hardens into cynicism. When you suppress fear, it doesn't dissolve. it mutates into chronic anxiety. When you suppress anger, it doesn't evaporate. It seeps out as passive aggression, bitterness, or chronic resentment. Friedrich Nietzsche warned, "Be careful that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster." Suppressing your own emotions is a kind of monster making, turning natural, living, flowing feelings into rigid, dangerous shadows that control you from the unconscious. The very thing you thought you were escaping, the chaos of feeling, becomes the chaos of inner fragmentation. But why were we taught this? Because emotions disrupt systems. They challenge the status quo. They threaten the illusion of control. A child who cries demands attention. A person who mourns reminds others of mortality. A heart that rages exposes injustice. Societies built on production, order, and appearance fear these disruptions. And so they teach, smile for the picture. Boys don't cry. Girls must be sweet. Don't make a scene. The culture of emotional dishonesty is not an accident. It is a design. A design to keep the machine running smoothly, even if it grinds human souls to dust in the process. But beneath it, hidden, aching, suffocating, lives the true self. Wild, feeling, longing for authenticity. The longer the true self remains hidden, the deeper the fracture grows inside. And one day, if we are lucky, if we are brave, we begin to feel the fracture. We begin to hear the muted cries of our own abandoned emotions, and we realize we have been living not as who we are, but as who we were taught we must become. Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of bad faith, the self-deception by which we deny our own freedom and authenticity to fit into socially acceptable roles. Emotional dishonesty is the ultimate bad faith. It is the quiet betrayal of self to preserve acceptance from others. But acceptance at the cost of authenticity is no acceptance at all. It is loneliness dressed as belonging. There is a reason emotional honesty feels so terrifying. It threatens the fragile structures built around us. Structures that were never meant to hold the full magnitude of a real, feeling human soul. To be emotionally honest is to risk rejection, but to be emotionally dishonest is to guarantee self-abandonment. And in that tension between the fear of losing others and the fear of losing yourself, the soul must choose. If you feel the stirring of that choice already, if you sense that beneath the fear is something wild, something true, consider subscribing. Here, we believe that your realness is not a flaw. It is the beginning of your freedom. Before we move forward, sit with this question. When did you first learn that your emotions were too much? And who might you become if you stopped apologizing for feeling? Emotional dishonesty is a quiet thief. It doesn't storm into your life with flashing alarms. It creeps in, small and almost invisible, stealing your vitality. One unspoken feeling at a time. You don't notice it at first. You just notice that some days feel heavier than they should. That joy seems muted. That connection feels strangely hollow. You laugh at the right moments. You say the right words. You live the right life, and yet something inside you remains untouched, unfelt, growing colder with every passing year. When emotions are buried, they do not die, they rot. They ferment in the dark places of your psyche, becoming distortions of their original truth. Suppressed sadness turns into chronic numbness. Suppressed fear turns into generalized anxiety. Suppressed anger turns into resentment, passive aggression, or even physical illness. Neurological studies show that emotional suppression increases physiological stress, higher blood pressure, faster heart rate, lower immune function. You cannot deceive the body. You can only delay its reaction. Psychologically, the cost is just as steep. Living in emotional dishonesty erodes self-trust. When you deny your feelings, you teach yourself one brutal lesson. My inner world is not safe, and if your own emotions cannot be trusted, how can you trust your intuition? How can you trust your desires? How can you trust yourself at all? Over time, this inner division becomes so familiar, so normalized, that you forget there was ever another way. Become a ghost in your own life, present in body, absent in soul. Relationships suffer because no true intimacy can exist where truth is forbidden. Dreams wither because no authentic passion can survive where emotions are silenced. Identity fractures because without emotional honesty, you lose the map to who you are. Arthur Schopenhauer warned of the profound loneliness that accompanies self-alienation. Mostly, it is loss, which teaches us about the worth of things. But what if the greatest loss is not of things, but of yourself? The unseen consequence of emotional dishonesty is the gradual, devastating erosion of self. Not all at once, piece by piece. Each time you smile when you want to cry. Each time you say it's fine when it's not. Each time you swallow a truth because it's easier to stay silent. You vanish a little more. And the world encourages it because the world prefers neatness over truth, comfort over confrontation, masks over mirrors. You are rewarded for hiding, praised for endurance, congratulated for strength. Strength defined as your ability to feel nothing, but real strength was never numbness. Real strength is the courage to feel and to live honestly through it. When emotional dishonesty becomes a cultural norm, an entire society suffers. Art becomes hollow. Leadership becomes performative. Relationships become transactional. Dreams become marketable but empty. A society that shames real emotion builds monuments to its own despair, hiding behind achievement, productivity, and curated images of success, while its collective soul slowly suffocates. Philosopher Albert Camus spoke of the absurdity of life, how humans desperately seek meaning in a universe that offers none. But he also offered a radical rebellion. In the midst of winter, I found there was, within me, an invincible summer. Emotional honesty is that invincible summer, not a denial of suffering, but a fierce affirmation of life in all its unbearable beauty. If these words awaken something restless inside you, if you feel a memory of your own lost voice stirring, know this: you are not broken for feeling. You are not weak for longing to be real. You are awakening to a truth deeper than any mask could ever offer. Stay with us. Here, your truth is not too much. It is your greatest revolution. Before we move forward, ask yourself, what has the mask cost you? And are you ready to see what could grow if you dared to put it down? True rebellion doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes it looks like this: sitting quietly with your own heart and refusing to turn away. The greatest revolution you will ever lead is the quiet, fierce act of reclaiming your right to feel. For so long you were taught that strength meant silence, that resilience meant suppression, that survival meant smiling through the breaking. But now you have another choice. The choice to meet your emotions not as enemies, but as messengers, not as threats to your survival, but as bridges back to your soul. Carl Jung said, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To break free from emotional dishonesty, you do not need to chase light. You need to turn and face the feelings you were taught to fear. Anger is not a defect. It is the soul's alarm bell that something sacred is being violated. Sadness is not weakness. It is the heart's mourning for something loved and lost. Fear is not failure. It is the mind's attempt to protect you. Joy is not recklessness. It is the soul's natural expression of aliveness. Practical acts of emotional rebellion. Name what you feel. The first step is radical acknowledgement. Instead of pushing emotions away, pause and name them. I feel anger. I feel grief. I feel fear. Naming feelings helps deactivate the amygdala's panic response and brings the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, back online. Create safe containers. You don't have to unleash your emotions chaotically. You can create intentional spaces. Journaling your rawest feelings without censoring yourself. Speaking honestly with a trusted friend or therapist. Allowing yourself to cry, rage, celebrate, alone if necessary, without judgment. Challenge emotional myths. Every time you hear the old programming whisper, crying is weak, anger makes you a bad person, joy should be contained. Challenge it. Ask yourself, who taught me that? Was it true then? Is it true now? Practice micro-honesty daily. Start small, saying, I'm actually not okay today, instead of, I'm fine. Admitting when you feel overwhelmed instead of pretending to be in control. Laughing loudly when something truly delights you without shrinking it down. Each act of emotional honesty is a crack in the old facade. Each crack lets light in. Historical examples of emotional rebellion. Maya Angelou, through her poetry, told the truth about trauma, racism, and resilience, refusing to sanitize her pain for anyone's comfort. Viktor Frankl, even in the horror of concentration camps, affirmed the right to human emotion and meaning, refusing to let despair define him. Frida Kahlo, through her art, revealed her physical and emotional wounds without apology, creating beauty from raw vulnerability. They did not conquer by hiding. They conquered by feeling, and by daring to show the world that truth. To feel fully is to live fully, and to live fully is the greatest rebellion against a world that profits from your numbness. Emotional honesty reconnects you with life itself. It rebuilds bridges you thought were lost, to yourself, to others, to dreams you thought were too dangerous to chase. If these words stir something real inside you, if you feel even a faint crack forming in the mask you were taught to wear, know this: you are not too emotional, you are not too sensitive, you are not too broken. You are waking up to your own humanity. And your humanity is not your burden, it is your gift. Here we honor the wild, the real, the beautifully imperfect truths you carry. If you feel called to keep walking this path with us, consider subscribing. Your voice, your story, your feelings, they are needed. They are the seeds of your liberation. Before we move forward, ask yourself, what truth inside you is still waiting to be heard? And what would happen if you finally gave it a voice? There is a freedom that few people ever taste, not because it is hidden, but because it demands a price many are too afraid to pay. The price of being seen, truly, deeply, unguardedly seen. The ultimate truth is this: emotional honesty is not weakness. It is liberation. It is the key that unlocks the cage you thought was just the way life is. It is the bridge that reconnects you to your forgotten self. The self that was never broken, only buried beneath the rubble of fear and silence. Viktor Frankl once said, "What is to give light must endure burning. And emotional honesty is the burning, the fierce, beautiful, necessary burning away of the lies you were taught to live by. Not because your truth is dangerous, but because your truth is powerful beyond measure. When you speak your real feelings, not the edited versions, not the socially acceptable fragments, you reclaim your voice. When you allow yourself to mourn, rage, celebrate without shame, you reclaim your wholeness. When you stand in your truth, even trembling, you send a signal to the world. I will no longer betray myself for acceptance. You may lose some things along the way. The approval of those who preferred your silence, the comfort of fitting into spaces too small for your soul. But what you gain is beyond price, self-trust that no external validation can shake. Relationships built not on performance, but on authenticity. Dreams rooted not in obligation, but in true desire. And above all, you gain yourself. Emotional honesty doesn't make life easier, it makes life real. And in reality, in the full, fierce, unedited experience of being alive, you find a joy deeper than happiness, a peace stronger than comfort. You find belonging, not in others' acceptance, but in your own embrace. Practical truth. Every time you choose honesty over perfection, you heal a little more. Every time you name a feeling without judgment, you dismantle the old cage. Every time you allow yourself to be seen, even just by yourself, you reclaim sacred ground. This is not a one-time revolution. It is a daily, sacred act of defiance. In the end, the question is not, will the world accept my truth? The real question is, will I? Because when you choose to honor your real emotions, you are no longer waiting for permission to live. You are giving yourself the permission you always deserved. If this journey stirred something inside you, if it made you feel a little less alone, a little more seen, I invite you to share your reflections in the comments below. Your story, your truth, your voice, they matter. You never know who might find their own courage through your honesty. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. Here, we don't chase perfection, we chase truth. We create a space where being real is the only requirement for belonging, because the world doesn't need another perfect mask. It needs your imperfect, wild, beautifully honest self. And you are ready. You have always been ready.